Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Identicast. With me today, I have Tyler Croak from Hydden.io, and we are going to be talking about identity threat detection and remediation, as well as improving your security posture. Welcome, Tyler.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Tyler, our audience would love to get a little background on you, so if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah, happily. So I started out in this space as actually as a help desk person. So this was back in my college years. I was an intern at Harley Davidson Motorcycle Company, actually up in Pennsylvania, and was really passionate about cybersecurity ever since I've been a teenager. And there wasn't a lot of opportunities in Pennsylvania, right? So I went to a school at Penn State University. And once I graduated, I moved down to Alexandria, Virginia, and again started as a help desk person at a lesser known cybersecurity company at the time called Mandiant. So back then, they were less than 200 people. And my career pretty much took off from there. I was like sitting side by side incident responders, learning from them. Even though I was a help desk person, I progressed from doing help desk work to then systems administration, systems engineering. And over time, I became like a product owner of a lot of endpoint security products, right? And identity access management products. So, and keep in mind, this was all done in a very unique environment, right? Like if you're working alongside people that are responding to some of the biggest breaches of the decade, you're rolling out those sort of products in very, very unique ways. Like a typical antivirus deployment looks very different in an environment like Mandiant, folks that are working with malware every day. So very cool environment. And then, so that was my foray into like identity access management space. This was back in 2013 or so. And then I basically helped adopt Thycotic's secret server in the FireEye, Mandiant and FireEye environments because eventually Mandiant got acquired by FireEye. So I progressed throughout that systems engineering track. And then after that, I actually went to work for Thycotic. So they saw how well I helped the product uh, towards adoption overall, like taking that product and then adopting it to our environment and expanding how many users used it within our environment. They saw my success and they actually brought me on the road to do like webinars and do in-person speaking events. So I got to speak at RSA a couple of times. And the strategies that I was deploying worked. And so I basically went to work for Thycotic and then rolled out those strategies for other Fortune 500 companies. So it all started really from there. And then my last role, I was a principal cybersecurity strategist at a company called Lookout. So I actually got to do some innovating and work on some identity specific patents. And then I acted as a executive advisor for all things cybersecurity. The last year I was there, I worked on a threat intelligence project. So started focusing more on tracking like adversarial trends. And this was much wider than just the identity scope, right? This was any kind of threat actor activity and trend overall. So um, I came back to the identity space here at Hydden because I'm really passionate about it. Like I frankly missed working more closely in identity, and I also was very passionate about the mission here at Hydden. And there's many folks here that I've worked with previously, many of which I know are experts in the field, and so it's just a great timing to come back to this space. And I feel like I'm at a different point in my career now that I can contribute more widely to emerging identity technologies and contribute towards standards and also leverage threat research and broader identity security research to help shape the next generation of identity products.
No, that's very impressive and quite the journey. Congrats.
Thanks.
So let's jump right into it because
Yeah.
this podcast is really focused on some of the emerging trends, and along those lines,
Yep.
we've always said a lot of the in or attacks from an identity perspective are focused on the insiders, right?
Yep.
It's insiders, it's privileged users, etc. And what we have seen over the years is even if you have a mature identity governance solution, you're not really reconciling all kinds of accounts that are created on the back end. Even from a privilege management standpoint, it's you're managing those that you can discover and inventory in your
Hmm.
system. But quite often, you do have identities being created outside the purview of your IAM solution, right? And that's
Yep.
sort of the basis of this identity threat detection and improved security posture push that
Yep.
that's happening in this space. And you also mentioned joining Hidden. And just for everyone out there, Hidden is no longer hidden. They are out of stealth mode.
Love that.
So with that, Tyler, if you don't mind, give us a little intro about Hidden and what your
Yeah.
charter is from the ITDR.
Yeah, sure. So Hidden's focus really is on providing complete visibility into every identity account and privilege across your entire infrastructure. And the scope is both humans and machines because we do feel that there's an interrelationship there.
Mhm.
So we're discovering, reporting, and alerting on identity threats, and we're intending to help strengthen the posture through near real-time visibility of the entire identity and access estate. That's really the scope of the mission that we have. And we also feel like in many cases there's a lot of instances where there's focus on like cloud only, or in some cases vendors that are on-prem only. But in all reality, like identities are everywhere. You have to discover all of them and make them a part of your scope. So going back to the comment that you wrote around identities that fall like out of scope, or somebody's creating them somewhere else, sometimes it just comes down to XYZ product doesn't support this particular connector for this legacy equipment. So we're looking into things like that too, and working on prioritizing. In some cases, it might be like legacy infrastructure, right, or legacy operating systems. So you have to have a holistic picture of what all identities are out there. You know the saying like you can't see what you don't know. This is sort of the same thing, right? Like you have to do a comprehensive discovery process as a first step.
Yep. So, how does Hidden complement an existing IAM solution today? I mean,
Yeah,
are we talking rip and replace? Are we talking interoperability?
sure.
How does that look from a IAM
Yeah,
journey?
yeah, absolutely. So, in many cases, what we're trying to do is complement these existing systems, right? Like, we want to work within your existing ecosystem, which may mean things like um, sometimes you may be working with a PAM provider that just doesn't have the same data sources that we may be able to add. And so, in some cases, we'll be pulling data from identity stores directly that you might not have scope of. In other cases, if you do have like a PAM within your environment, we may just pull back some of the identity data directly from the PAM. So the intention here with the platform is really to be the glue between these different identity providers. So whether you have an IGA solution, a PAM solution, what we want to do is pull back identity data and look at it centrally. And then one of the main things that we're focusing on is making sure that organizations have a clear understanding of that human to non-human interaction, right? And that association, because in a lot of cases, you have people that maybe leave an organization at a particular point in time, right? And a service account isn't transitioned over to a new human, a new person, a new owner, right? And that leaves a lot of blind spots, right? It
Right.
creates a lot of problems when you're talking about orphaned accounts. So that's one of the things that we're trying to raise visibility of too with our product.
So, going back to some of your experiences around IAM and PAM,
Yeah.
with this domain coming up, and the maturity curve for organizations trying to get an ITDR solution out there, there's PAM vendors that are pushing ITDR. There's networking solutions, endpoints that are also doing ITDR, and I think some IGA solutions are also trying to get there. How would you go about selecting the right solution, right? I mean, what's
Yep.
the ultimate sweet spot for customers trying to go down this path?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like, before I even answer that, I want to take a little bit of a step back because I think a lot of customers, they're asking questions about these new acronyms that are out there, but like you first have to start with inventorying what you have.
Hmm.
So, like, if I was to walk through a model, my model would look something like this. You need to discover what's out there first. Then you need to manage those accounts. This is typically in like a PAM solution. Then there's usually some form of governance over those accounts, which usually connects to IGA. And
Mhm.
then you have assessment. Assessment, I would say, is more associated with security posture management. And then you have remediation. And that's where your ITDR kind of falls in. So the way that I look at this space is actually similar to what's trying to be done in the XDR space. So if you look at XDR, where you have the consolidation of endpoint, network, all into one platform, I think there's different approaches. There's the open XDR approach, and open XDR, the approach there really is maybe the vendor provides their own platform, and then they integrate with a whole host of other vendors to do detection and response, and that's
Yep.
considered like more of an open XDR framework. I think what we're trying to accomplish here is similar, but on the identity scale, right? So we believe we want to integrate with all of these other vendors and then provide additional capabilities on top of what they have. So maybe because of the signals that we see through our integrations, marrying the identity data together or looking for bad behavior from that identity data, we may be able to trigger an integration with a third party directly, like a vendor like Okta, for example. It may be something as simple as disabling an account. Uh, I think one of the things that we see happen quite often from a threat actor perspective is still tactics that are social engineering related, right? So
Mm.
stealing a set of credentials, logging into an Okta portal, and then like rapidly laterally moving to any applications that are accessible in the Okta environment. That's something that has been happening pretty frequently the last year and a half from some pretty notorious threat actors. So being able to track like rapid access of this user logged into Okta and then immediately access these 15 other SaaS apps. We need the ability to consolidate that identity data and then be able to see that it's bad and not legitimate, and then rapidly cut off access, right? Because that's one of the methods in which these actors are moving. So I think detection and response capabilities, um, while the market may desire most of this to be done natively, I think
Mhm.
what we need to be thinking about is a lot of organizations, whether you're mid-size or large size, are still really focused on having lots of different vendors, maybe working towards consolidation, but they're not quite there yet. So I think we need to meet customers in the middle by offering some integrations that carry out some of these responsive actions within these third party products. So that's my thought on the space. I think as far as additional detection and remediation options go, there's lots of definition to happen still. And
Yeah.
that's the nice thing about these acronyms, whether you're talking about identity security posture management or identity threat detection and response, there's lots of definition to still be had, which is great. Like vendors can help differentiate in those ways. And I think the best sort of responsive actions that we're going to come up with are yet to come. They haven't been created yet, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is still growing,
Yeah.
this particular domain. I think some of the use cases you brought up are definitely on point, and I think our viewers would be interested to learn more about it. For the most part, I think from an identity governance standpoint, the challenges today that ITDR helps with is, the accounts you've reconciled aren't complete because whatever the case may be, maybe a reconciliation failed or a job failed or
Yep.
a connection to the target system failed. So you don't have a complete recon of all of the users and their permissions in that particular system. So we're starting to see that pop up from audit reports
Yep.
where what the IGA solution sees isn't necessarily reflective of what's in the target system. But the additional use case you brought up of lateral movement within an Okta platform is also, in the acronym soup, could also go back to things that a user entity behavior
Yep.
analytics solution can also provide, right? So help me understand that delineation between what this ITDR space is doing versus what UEBA tried to do and was unsuccessful.
So I think I think there hasn't been a whole lot of success from what I've seen in tying in UEBA anomaly detections to holistically to responsive actions. And I think in many cases, these platforms haven't had the framework to do that really well. Meaning, um, anomaly detection is really focused on, in many cases, automatic and manual rule creation, detection rule creation, right? So
Hmm.
maybe you're using some sort of artificial intelligence to help detect bad behaviors when sorting through log data. Where is it married to, IGA? Um, I still think IGA in many cases is a challenging area that hasn't been completed yet. Like none of these areas
I
can be
would
marked
agree.
as completed per
Yeah.
se, but I think IGA in particular is an area that we've seen be adjacent to PAMs and these new acronyms. I personally believe that um, many of these areas will end up just merging together. I almost feel like, in my gut, I feel like many of these acronyms are just broadly just describing identity security, right? And so, when it comes to entitlements, when it comes to authorization, I think we're going to see authorization checks that occur actually at the security posture management layer.
Yep.
So that might be the layer where authorization problems actually get fixed. But then you want to ask the broader question, does that actually just belong then to IGA products? Or does it belong beside ITDR products?
Yeah.
And that brings me back to this question about, ideally, we're going to see, I think, speculate that vendors may consolidate between these acronyms. They're either going to try to own multiple acronyms at the same time to represent a more holistic vision, or they're going to try to carve out being best at that specific area. So I actually think for IGA, it's not necessarily the ITDR that is going to fix it per se or remediate it. I would prefer to see it first as an ISPM check, something that says, hey, this configuration looks bad. This entitlement wasn't removed correctly. This
Yeah.
authorization, because of XYZ error, wasn't re-added to this particular account. I'd rather see that in a identity security posture management check, and then from that offer potential remediation actions. I think at first these vendors are going to take the approach of recommended actions. Starting out in this field, that's what I see is folks that are saying like, hey, we have ITDR. There may be some limited capabilities built in today because the term is still being defined. We're going to first see vendors that say, these are the recommended action items that you have for your environment. And
Yep.
it's going to come back to a mixture of ISPM and ITDR. And then I think eventually the idea will be, let me have a platform that does this stuff natively, that reaches out to this third party and triggers the specific action, or I do it myself within my platform. Those are the real two approaches to me. And again, I draw a parallel here to the XDR market because even XDR players are trying to include this as part of their scope. So I think it's a fascinating space, but that's essentially how I foresee it unfolding. Definitely something debate worthy for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating, right? If you go back, you look at the SIM or SIEM space, which, um, for all intents and purposes, it was, hey, you can do all of this, but you have to write a whole bunch of correlation rules to get it done. Along comes UEBA, which says we've got all these correlations out of the box, and we're going to look at the behavior. And there was some integration with IGA tools, more around the analytics and behavior of
Yep.
existing accounts, right? Hey, here's some of your peers, and here's what they're doing. Would you like similar access, or let's remove access because none of your peers have this particular entitlement. But XDR component just shifted that and entirely in this
Yep.
market, right? And it's taking a look at it from, as you mentioned, the improved posture management, similar to what the cloud security provider started doing, right? It's following
Exactly. Yep.
the playbook of a CSPM, if you will. This is your Okta tenant. It's not configured correctly. This is your sale
Yep.
point and it's not configured correctly. You don't have the roles set up correctly. But by the way, this ITDR component is now looking at everything that your PAM solution isn't discovering or your IGA solution isn't discovering, and then bringing that back into an ISPM checklist as well. So it's
Yeah.
definitely interesting. It is a maturity curve, if you will, from an IAM deployment. Or would you see this as something organizations should start with to get an inventory of what's out there? What are your thoughts on that?
I think you have to start with the inventory, right? Like if you were to poll an audience around like where they're at in their identity management lifecycle, right? If you ask that question, I guarantee you would find mid-sized organizations that still aren't using a PAM solution, right? Like probably hundreds or dozens. And it's 2024, but you could get that answer because of market reasons, budget reasons, things like that, right? And so you can even start for free by just inventorying what identities you have in your environment. What are your identity stores?
Mhm.
Who on your team has access to the most critical resources? So starting out with like a baseline, even if it's as bad as an Excel sheet, that's better than nothing.
Right.
And I actually find um, this problem to be similar to a data inventorying problem. And like as you know, if you look at like an attacker life cycle, um, there are ways other than identities to get into an environment, to get into an organization besides an identity. I would say that identity attacks are definitely on the rise, but
Mhm.
you still have things like supply chain attacks. You still have direct exploits. Direct exploits are still the number one initial access vector. But if you think about this, a lot of organizations need to focus on the identity side. How can I prevent attackers from getting in from any sort of identity related initial access vector? And then the other side is how do I prevent the attackers from stealing my most sensitive data within my organization? So in many cases, I think organizations need to just start with the basics of I need to inventory all my identities within my environment, who all has access, who all has privileged access. And then the other question really should be what data is the most sensitive within my environment and who all has access to that sensitive data, because really that's what an attacker is going to be focused on, right? So I feel like there's this life cycle where many organizations just have to take a step back and say, maybe I don't need PAM to start. Maybe I do, but maybe I need to start with some sort of comprehensive discovery process as
Mhm.
my initial starting point. And so I feel like in many cases, customers may jumpstart ahead of where they might actually need to begin, and they need to be asking questions about um, is my view of my identities truly comprehensive? Is it truly holistic and inclusive of all my legacy data stores, all the equipment that I have in my environments, which may include like IoT devices or even like file shares and things like that, right? So
Yep.
these are all things that we have to think about for sure.
No, this was very insightful, and thank you for sharing your knowledge here with us and our viewers. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
so,
no, thanks for having me. It was great. I love talking about this stuff. You got probably can hear the passion in my voice, but yeah, I love this space. And just to leave some final remarks here, real quick. I think that a lot of these acronyms that we have in this space, more broadly, and I won't blame like one or two analyst firms for creating them or anything like that. But I think that there are opportunities to carve out differentiation within these specific acronyms, whether it's ISPM or ITDR. I also think there's opportunity for convergence, where you're going to have people that are able to do a couple of these things really well. But I almost think we need to take that step back and say, like, well, attackers are probably going to target PAMs. They already are, actually.
yep,
Attackers are probably targeting IGAs to understand your authorization. So we need to like almost zoom out and use that data and ingest that data as well for looking for bad behaviors, because now these systems are regularly targeted. So that's kind of my view, is we almost need to zoom out, take a step back as well in your process and say, do I know where all of my identities are within my environment? Do I know every single data store within my environment where an identity touches? And start there, and don't ignore your gaps. Like, don't ignore uh, identities that may exist within your environment that are not currently being included in one of the products, identity products that you have today. So that's all I want to leave you with. And thanks for having me today.
No, and thank you. This was very good information. Tyler Croak from Hidden.io. Thank you.